Surrounded by enemies and full of mountains, how did tiny Switzerland stay free while Hitler conquered almost all of Europe? The Nazis had a complete plan to invade. So, why didn't they? In a June 1941 meeting with his alliance partner Benito Mussolini, Adolf Hitler described Switzerland's people and governmental system as the mortal enemies of the new Germany. Through this declaration, he displayed his deep-seated hatred for Swiss democratic ideology. Throughout World War II, Hitler regularly stated his intention to occupy Switzerland, and Nazi forces compiled comprehensive examination documents for an Alpine invasion. The country's strategic position inside Axis-controlled territories failed to shake Switzerland's independence and neutrality from 1940 to 1944 during World War II. Complete neutrality enabled Switzerland to evade all destruction that consumed extensive areas of Europe. This historical anomaly will be studied from military through geographical to economic and political perspectives to analyze the various elements which protected Switzerland from Nazi invasion during World War II. Part 1. The strategic context and Operation Tannenbaum. We need to travel back to the summer of 1940. This event unfolded in a shocking, dark moment during World War II. After Germany's blitzkrieg defeat, France became Europe's largest defeated great power when its military surrendered to Germany's strike operations. Poland had already fallen. Norway and Denmark had surrendered. All three territories in the Low Countries, including Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, became occupied territories. France joined these nations which Germany had conquered. After these events, enemy forces completely contained a single minuscule landlocked territory, Switzerland. Picture this. The democratic Alpine country found itself surrounded by hostile powers. Nazi Germany threatened from the north and east. Fascist Italy established its presence in the south. All previously neutral areas and independent regions in the west had fallen to Axis control. Switzerland looked less like an independent state and more like a target waiting to be swallowed. Operation Tannenbaum, the plan to invade. What action did the Nazis initiate? They developed a military scheme that aimed to eliminate Switzerland's neutrality and ultimately merge it into Nazi territories. Operation Tannenbaum was the German military's name for the invasion of Switzerland, initially referred to as Operation Grün. Before receiving its final name, the plan proceeded with deadly intent regardless of what it was called. Here's what the plan involved. An offensive requiring 500,000 soldiers, approximately half of Germany's military presence and comparable to the entire Swiss population across various cantons. Massive Luftwaffe air attacks to damage Swiss air bases, military assets, and transport infrastructure before the ground invasion. Italian forces deployed from southern regions to pressure Switzerland's border. Heinrich Himmler, the infamous SS leader, held private discussions about Swiss governance after the Nazi invasion, including commanders, timelines, and the pace of Nazification. This wasn't a vague fantasy. Relevant details were fully incorporated into a concrete operational design. Maps were drawn, timelines were discussed, intelligence was gathered. So the critical question remains, why didn't it happen? On paper, Operation Tannenbaum resembled most other German military campaigns. Yet Switzerland proved an unyielding target against the planned Nazi takeover. Several factors were decisive. The geography was brutal. The level of Swiss military opposition proved more substantial than analysts predicted. Switzerland's relation with Germany functioned in a way that benefited Nazi wartime efforts. Operation Barbarossa against the Soviet Union demanded Germany's complete strategic focus instead of invading Switzerland. Studying Operation Tannenbaum shows that Switzerland was in a rather vulnerable situation at that time, and at the same time, an attempt to balance between neutrality on the one hand and the presence of hostile powers on the other hand. Part 2. The Alpine Fortress. Geographical Factors. Switzerland's distinctive landscape made it highly challenging for potential enemy forces to penetrate. The Alps dominate Switzerland's geography, with mountains reaching beyond 14,000 feet, creating defensive terrain that enemy forces would struggle to overcome. The mountainous conditions, with steep valleys and narrow passes, formed formidable barriers compared to the relatively easy conquests Germany made in flat European areas during its Blitzkrieg campaigns. The Swiss Alps presented conditions that severely limited the ability of German forces to execute their primary combat strategy of mobile armored warfare. The Swiss military command integrated this geographic advantage as the foundation for its defensive strategy. General Henri Guisan established what military historians call the National Redoubt strategy as commander-in-chief of the Swiss armed forces during World War II. This plan leveraged Switzerland's natural landscape to create a defensive network with few entry points. The National Redoubt strategic plan achieved its goal through straightforward logic. During an invasion, the Swiss army would occupy strategically fortified Alpine positions instead of defending the vulnerable northern plains, which held most of Switzerland's population and economic infrastructure. These mountain outposts would control crucial north-south transportation routes through European Alpine passes and tunnels critical to Axis military strategies. The Swiss government invested substantial resources in building extensive defensive structures across Alpine territories. Artillery bunkers disguised as residential buildings, extensive mountain fortifications with enormous cannon installations, underground military facilities carved into mountainsides. Strategic explosives were placed on bridges and mountain passes, elaborate tunnel and bunker networks deep within the earth, designed to sustain resistance for months or even years. These weren't merely symbolic defenses. Military historians consider the Swiss defensive network one of the most sophisticated defensive systems ever constructed. These facilities remained classified military secrets until declassification decades after World War II. They would have encountered an impossible situation if German invasion forces had successfully infiltrated Swiss territory. The enemy would face determined opposition holding strategic defensive locations within some of Europe's most challenging terrain. German troops would have become trapped in a protracted mountain battle, drawing resources Hitler needed for his other fighting fronts. Part 3. Military Preparedness. The Swiss Defense Strategy. Switzerland maintained well-trained forces whose military readiness would have transformed any potential Wehrmacht invasion into a financially prohibitive operation. Switzerland steadily maintained its military budget throughout the 1930s, when numerous European nations cut defense spending after World War I. By investing in superior weaponry, Switzerland gave its soldiers access to modern K-31 rifles that outclassed the German Kar 98K. Beyond equipment, Switzerland's defense system served as a powerful deterrent. The country operated a distinctive militia system through which every non-disabled male received military training and stored weapons at home. This created vast reserves that could mobilize rapidly during conflict. When General Guisan raised the maximum conscription age to 60 during World War II, Switzerland could assemble an 850,000-strong army from a population of just 4.2 million, a remarkable mobilization capability. Swiss citizens embraced a strategy of total resistance beyond regular training. Every region across the country maintained readiness for conflict. Military forces specialized in Alpine warfare operations. Civilian infrastructure was integrated into defense planning. Guerrilla warfare strategies were prepared for implementation if conventional resistance became untenable. Extensive preparations enabled the population to function effectively against the occupying forces. During the height of invasion threats in May 1940, Guisan summoned the Swiss officer corps to the historic Rütli Meadow, birthplace of the Swiss Confederation. The Rütli report contained Guisan's declaration that Switzerland would resist any invader until every Swiss person fought to their death. This determination sent Berlin a clear warning about the cost of occupation. Switzerland's preparations extended to hidden resistance cells that could maintain combat operations even if the government surrendered. Military equipment and supplies were concealed in sites throughout the country. Any German conquest using conventional methods would have encountered immediate resistance and prolonged guerrilla warfare supported by Switzerland's challenging terrain. This would have tied down extensive occupation forces needed on other fronts. Part 4. Economic factors, the financial relationship. Purely geographic factors such as mountains, neutrality as well as military might may convince us that Germany did not invade Switzerland, but it is important to understand the financial factors as well. Hitler therefore reckoned that due to Switzerland's preeminence as Nazi Germany's leading financial partner, the country would not let him down. This interactive relationship put paid to the economic aspect of the relationship. Crossing the mountainous border, disrupting the alliance, made no strategic sense. Swiss banks, Nazi Germany's financial lifeline. Swiss banks performed essential financial services for the Nazi regime by managing their money and helping conceal particular monetary assets. Here's how. Banking and gold transactions. Swiss banks functioned as an impenetrable financial reserve for Nazi monetary resources. As the war progressed, the Swiss National Bank, SNB, purchased massive quantities of Nazi German gold. Much of this was stolen wealth from occupied territories and Holocaust victims. A 1998 report by the Swiss Historical Commission revealed that the SNB held Nazi-harvested gold worth approximately $8.5 billion in present value, originally estimated at $440 million in 1998 dollars. Researchers estimated that over half came from looting victims. Financial conduit to the world, Switzerland helped Germany avoid the measure that the Allies were putting in place to isolate Germany's economy. Peculiarities included its neutrality and the strict policies it had in place regarding the banking services it provided. Swiss banks also offered necessary financial links and means for cross-border payments and international trade, and thus provided Nazi Germany with the financial versatility. Currency exchange services. The international market rejected looted valuables seized by Germany from occupied territories and victims. Swiss banks provided a quiet yet efficient currency exchange service that converted these assets into Swiss francs, US dollars, and other international currencies. Personal insurance for Nazi leaders. High-ranking Nazi officials maintained secret Swiss accounts to preserve their assets in case of defeat. These accounts served as backup plans for emergency evacuation. As Germany's position deteriorated in the mid-1940s, these secret assets enabled Nazi leaders to plan new lives abroad or fund their escape. The financial logic against invading Switzerland is clear. Had the Nazis invaded, critical banking records would likely have been destroyed, German assets imperiled, and the entire sanctions-bypassing infrastructure would have collapsed immediately. By seizing a few Alpine towns, Hitler would have forfeited access to billions in gold, currency, and international credibility. As Swiss sociologist John Ziegler noted, thanks to rationality, Hitler refrained from launching attacks on his banking institutions. Switzerland survived both world wars, partly due to its triple defense elements of geographical situation, diplomatic neutrality, and military preparedness. But cold economic facts ultimately deterred Hitler's tanks from crossing into Switzerland. Germany needed Swiss financial collaboration and continued access to global commerce networks when its international connections collapsed. Switzerland, meanwhile, balanced precariously between survival and complicity. Part 5. Economic interdependence, trade and industry. There are several areas that these previous histories have not fully covered in relation to Switzerland and Nazi Germany, which are the banks. Inasmuch as political relationships, Switzerland had more profound industrial relations with the Third Reich of Nazi Germany. Far from being a mere business partnership that involved exchange of money, services and products, this affected the lives of both entities greatly. The Swiss nation, in the 1940s, was a small country sandwiched between some of the most aggressive world powers of the time: Germany, Italy, and German-occupied France. This proved to be a rather unstable position for the Swiss government to be in. Indeed, it had to deal with some unprecedented predicaments. Instead of the adherence to ideological principles of the Nazi regime, their decisions during World War II can be explained by the necessity of survival. If Germany failed to accede to these demands, then the German economy would face isolation and diminish its access to crucial trade products. Domestic industries in Switzerland were insufficient to meet demands required of life essentials such as food, coal, and fuel. Economic power was much divided in favor of Germany due to the country having the main role in negotiations. They did not have to occupy Switzerland to make Swiss people understand that they cannot open their economy to others without a consent from Germany because they will be punished economically. These policies were initiated in Switzerland out of grim necessity because the country understood the importance of the policy of compromise. The analysis becomes particularly interesting because this relationship wasn't one-sided. Switzerland wasn't merely subject to German economic manipulation, but also provided essential goods and services the German war machine required. Precision manufacturing. Switzerland specialized in assembled goods, specifically industrial precision tools, ball bearings, timing devices, as well as other intricate tools. In order to keep tanks, planes, and other war equipment in a state of operational readiness, Germany required these components. There were outstanding supply needs that the German firms could not provide, and Swiss firms stepped in to fill these gaps. Weapons and munitions. During World War II, Swiss firms supplied weapons and other equipment not only to the Allies, but also to the Axis forces, even though Switzerland itself was officially exposed to the war. But according to the available statistics, they sided with the Axis powers at a ratio of 10-1. It would seem, however, that such a tremendous gap necessitates a historical perspective on Swiss neutrality. Transit rights. Switzerland permitted transit of civilian materials and allowed Germany to use the mountain pass railway tunnels connecting Germany and Italy. This gave Germany significant logistical advantages without diverting resources to more difficult routes. Electric power. Swiss hydroelectric facilities supplied electricity to German industrial cities, providing a significant portion of Nazi Germany's power needs. This worked in a way that was symbiotic or reciprocal. Both the teachers and learners benefited from the setup. Germany was able to get resources or services they needed without having to get into a multinational war to access it. At the same time, Swiss remained politically independent and did not experience the war. But, as it will be seen, to do this, certain ethical and tactical feats were paid. As the war progressed, the strategic calculus changed. By 1943, with German forces overstretched after devastating failures in North Africa and Stalingrad, attacking Switzerland's defensive mountain terrain became increasingly impractical compared to the economic benefits of maintaining the status quo. The wartime relationship between Switzerland and Germany was shaped more by economic pragmatism than by military force or diplomatic agreements. This interesting relationship shows that, The end justifies the means prejudice occurs when the methods of survival contradict with the policy of no pick side during a war. Part 6. Political and intelligence factors. The political aspect and the intelligence also played a key role to substantiate Hitler's decision of not attacking Switzerland. Whereas in the Second World War, Switzerland proved to be very important in diplomatic activity and espionage. German and the Allied intelligence apparatus was extremely active in Switzerland, not only collecting information, but also sometimes even conducting meetings on neutral territory secretly. Switzerland was in a position to eavesdrop on the Germans because of its geographical position during the Second World War. The country served as a venue for clandestine diplomatic communications, a meeting ground for both Allied and Axis intelligence, a platform for gathering information about military objectives, a pathway for intelligence agents operating in enemy-controlled territories. Allen Dulles, who later became the first CIA director, ran American intelligence operations from Bern, while German intelligence maintained a significant presence in the same territory. This intelligence value would have vanished had Switzerland been invaded and occupied. Diplomatically, invading Switzerland would have provided the Allies with powerful propaganda demonstrating Nazi aggression toward peaceful democratic states. Such a move would have complicated Germany's relations with other neutral countries and potentially pushed them towards supporting the Allies. Switzerland also grew increasingly important throughout the war for its humanitarian functions. The Geneva-based International Committee of the Red Cross facilitated prisoner exchanges, delivered relief packages to POWs, and conducted humanitarian work that occasionally benefited German strategic interests. Part 7. Strategic Priorities and Military Resources. Hitler's decision to avoid invading Switzerland can be understood through simple military mathematics. The costs outweigh potential gains, primarily as Germany fought on multiple fronts. Operation Tannenbaum would have required approximately 500,000 troops for the initial invasion, plus ongoing occupation forces, resources better utilized elsewhere. When Switzerland was first surrounded in 1940, Hitler was focused on Britain and planning Operation Barbarossa against the Soviet Union. By 1941, the Eastern Front had become Germany's all-consuming priority. From 1942 onward, Germany fought defensively rather than seeking new conquests. German military commanders recognized that Alpine warfare would create a mountain Verdun, a resource-draining quagmire that would harm their efforts on other fronts. As well, significant occupation forces would be needed to hold such mountainous domains and crush rebellion at a prohibitive strategic price given the German dearth of workforce over a range of fronts. Part 8. Hitler's Calculations. In a way, many of the fate of Switzerland can be attributed to the individual decisions made by Adolf Hitler. Perversely, underlying his verbal disdain for Switzerland's democracy, he seemed to be aware of the country's strategic importance due to its neutral status. Emotional prejudice manifested itself significantly in Hitler's decision-making abilities when he was leading military policies and strategies. Nevertheless, Switzerland was saved by strictly rational and purely practical reasons. Its relatively minor strategic importance and the high army cost of invasion led Hitler to postpone action against it in favor of Eastern territorial ambitions. During his planning, Hitler determined that Switzerland could wait until after securing decisive victories elsewhere. He intended to defer consideration of Switzerland's future until achieving his primary strategic goals in Europe. Switzerland carefully avoided actions that might provoke Hitler or create pretexts for invasion. While accommodating Nazi economic demands, they maintained sufficient autonomy to prevent becoming a German satellite state. Hitler's personal view. What were Hitler's actual thoughts about Switzerland? Hitler despised Switzerland. From his perspective, Switzerland's democratic system was weak, its neutrality amounted to cowardice, and its multi-ethnic population represented ineffective governance. To Hitler, Switzerland embodied a nation of bourgeois cowards clinging to outdated values of independence that Nazi doctrine rejected. Yet, despite this disdain, he refrained from invasion. Why? That's where things get interesting. A rare moment of pragmatism. Most observers correctly view Hitler as an irrational leader. His decisions were frequently dominated by ideological beliefs, anti-Semitism, anti-communism, and notions of racial superiority that contradicted strategic logic. His single-mindedness to invade Soviet ground resulted in fatal decisions such as wintertime invasions with insufficient preparation. He did not always take the smart road. Switzerland, though, was another case where ideological considerations gave way to practical ones. Switzerland was not a major threat to security, and it was without much implemental or territorial import. The military expense of invasion would have been prohibitive, given Switzerland's mountainous landscape and disciplined militia. Hitler's priorities lay eastward. Russia, Ukraine, and the Caucasus oil fields offered the Lebensraum, living space, he sought for the German people. From a purely strategic standpoint, Switzerland's position held insufficient value to warrant German military intervention. While its situation was problematic, it posed no imminent threat. Switzerland created difficulties, but the expense and effort of invasion didn't justify action against it. We'll deal with them later. Apparently, Hitler might not have considered attacking Switzerland as his top priority, and hence the later downing of the plan. After the Europeans were overthrown and the Soviet Union conquered, he could attend Switzerland when he wanted to. There was no reason to eliminate a state that was not a threat and which brought a lot of benefits to Russia in the form of cash. This delay in approach to the secondary objectives was typical for the Nazis' administration. Hitler always put off the pursuit of smaller objectives in the achievement of his core political agendas. Switzerland's careful balance. The Swiss remained neutral and did not get involved in the war, and thus their government showed a lot of apprehension. They had to be highly sensitive in their actions to avoid being perceived as a threat to Hitler, while at the same time being formally neutral. Most of the German requests were positively met by Switzerland as the country bought German products, traded materials, and provided financial services. It kept an independence from German rule during the period 1939 to 1945, while offering enough collaboration. This balancing act was deliberate. The leaders of Switzerland knew that to retaliate would lead to an invasion, and therefore they lowered their resistance in order to maintain independence, but also enough to offer utilities that are desired by a potential invader. In the end, calculated indifference. From a broader perspective, Hitler's attitude toward Switzerland combined disdain, disinterest, and postponement. He allowed it to exist without admiration or fear for Switzerland because its current state efficiently served German aims, perhaps one of his few rational judgments amid a conflict marked by fanaticism. Part 9. The View from Switzerland Living Under Threat. World War II evokes images of devastated cities, occupied territories, and active battle zones. Switzerland rarely appears in these mental pictures because Germany never invaded, despite the ever-present threat. However, confusing survival with safety would be a mistake. Throughout World War II, the Swiss people endured perpetual anxiety, overwhelming stress, and significant daily sacrifices while living under constant threat of invasion. Every morning, Swiss citizens wondered if German tanks would appear at their borders that day. Completely encircled, with German-occupied territories to the east and west, Italy to the south, and Germany to the north, an attack could come from any direction. This wasn't a distant concern, but an immediate, ever-present reality. Swiss newspapers, radio broadcasts, and school lessons continuously reported military developments from nearby regions. Families quietly stockpiled food, children learned air raid procedures, and farmers converted lawns to gardens to prepare for the worst. Rationing, blackouts, and self-sufficiency. Switzerland relied heavily on imported essentials such as fuel, grain, and industrial materials. When the Axis powers controlled trade routes, supplies dwindled to near standstill levels. The Swiss government implemented a comprehensive wartime economy. Strict rationing controlled everything from bread to butter to gasoline. Each citizen needed identification cards for rationed goods, and many households went without essentials. Agriculture expanded dramatically. The Anbauschlacht, or cultivation battle, converted all available spaces, public gardens, residential yards, vacant lots, into farmland to promote national self-sufficiency. Mandatory blackouts protected Swiss towns from being mistaken for German settlements by Allied bombers. Fuel shortages led to colder homes and the substitution of candles for electric lighting. Despite these hardships, the population demonstrated remarkable resilience. A nation on guard. Thus, in relative terms, Switzerland provided an extraordinary mobilization of the military force for a country of its size. Switzerland also has never been officially occupied or invaded during World War II. The military force in 1940 was 850,000 people, which is 20% of the total population of 4 million. It was an extraordinary display of nationalist sentiment, perhaps unseen on such a scale in any country in the world. Families were separated as men left their civilian occupations for mountain defenses. Trenches were dug, roads rigged with explosives, and the entire country transformed into a defensive network prepared for imminent attack. The Swiss people prioritized readiness over comfort, recognizing the existential threat at their borders. Diplomacy on a razor's edge. Meanwhile, the leaders of neutral Switzerland pursued a diplomatic tightrope act. However, though politically neutral, Switzerland could not stand aside when the continental storm started. Under pressure from Nazi Germany, the Swiss government made economic concessions, purchasing German coal, selling goods, and engaging in financial transactions. It was not, however, a matter of adhering to a specific political philosophy of biomedical science. These were decisions for the purpose of survival. The government managed to pull these tricks fully aware that too assertive positions could trigger retribution or aggression. Thus, Switzerland remained politically neutral, which was a dangerous game for it brought a lot of ethnic hardships. After the war, people started to wonder whether Switzerland acted adequately to stop the Nazis and adequately protect those in need. During the war, however, preserving existence took precedence over ideological purity. Switzerland maintained a watchful silence while demonstrating international non-alignment throughout the conflict. So yes, Switzerland stayed neutral. But that neutrality wasn't passive. It required constant vigilance, sacrifice, and nerve-wracking uncertainty. Citizens surrendered comforts. Soldiers remained battle-ready through brutal Alpine winters. Every resident lived with the daily risk of border violations, provocative incidents, or air raid sirens. Through these challenges, Switzerland maintained its neutrality and survived. The country emerged physically intact from World War II, yet the experience of enduring siege conditions permanently altered Swiss society. Part 10. The Legacy and Historical Debates. The roles of Switzerland in World War II become a shifting target of historical opinion. Alongside traditional accounts that focus on Swiss military preparedness and the national redoubt, other studies now exist that focus on how economic relationships with Nazi Germany helped to facilitate Swiss survival. Post-war investigations have increasingly scrutinized Switzerland's wartime actions, particularly regarding banking relationships with Nazi Germany, rejection of numerous Jewish refugees seeking asylum, trade relationships that benefited German war operations, acquisition of gold stolen from Holocaust victims. In the 1990s, Swiss banks reached a $1.25 billion settlement with Holocaust survivors following extensive investigations. Switzerland commissioned the independent Bergier Commission to examine the country's complex dealings with Nazi Germany during World War II. This redound look has now resulted in a deeper insight about Switzerland's war years experience, its praisable achievements on defense, and the ethical compromises in the life of a nation. Conclusion: multiple factors preserved Swiss independence. A series of overlapping factors kept Nazi Germany from attacking Switzerland. The mountainous terrain made invasion costly and time-consuming for potential aggressors. The national redoubt strategy would have ensured a protracted, resource-draining conflict. Germany gained substantial economic advantages without bearing occupation costs. Swiss banks provided valuable financial services to the Reich. Neutral Swiss territory served essential diplomatic and intelligence functions. Germany's limited resources were stretched across multiple battlefronts. German military strategy prioritized specific objectives over others. The Swiss World War II experience illustrates how military needs work with economic interests, geography, as well as political issues to determine wartime international relations. Even totalitarian regimes occasionally allow rational calculation to override ideology when pragmatic advantages are significant enough. Switzerland's commitment to neutrality required difficult ethical choices to maintain independence, while Europe endured its most significant turmoil, the Second World War. These tactical and strategic lessons continue to inform Switzerland's contemporary foreign policy and defense operations. Studying this aspect of World War II history gives us perspective on our present circumstances. Teutonic military threat, economic interdependence, and diplomatic artfulness that sustained Swiss independence contradicts the way rational asset calculation often dissociates from ideological association even during the darkest pages of human history. Please feel free to write your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe and like this video if you found this historical analysis useful.